Hey, 42 here. For most of human history, language was a solely verbal form of communication. And whilst we don't know exactly when humans first spoke, estimates range between 50 and 150,000 years ago, we do know that the written word came much later, perhaps just 5,500 years ago. But recent times have seen the invention of a completely new form of communication, one that most of us use every single day. Not the written word, but the typed word. Typing is becoming so ubiquitous in the modern world, it's in danger of killing off handwriting altogether. Cursive, that's joined up writing to you and me, was removed from the United States core curriculum in 2010, with the ability to use a keyboard and mouse added in its place not long after. This decision caused quite a bit of stir at the time. Plenty of people think joined-up writing is a basic life skill. But then again, when was the last time you wrote a letter in place of an email or text message? With the typed word very much here to stay then, our keyboards have quietly become some of the most important tools we interact with on a daily basis. But as we type out essays and do battle with internet trolls, few of us ever bother to consider where the familiar layout of keys that lies beneath our fingertips actually came from, or if that layout actually makes any sense. So, if your typing speed is so slow it's making you miss deadlines, obliterating your street cred, or bringing shame to your entire family, I'm about to tell you exactly who's to blame. Christopher Scholes was a 19th century printer who decided to try his hand at politics. It's fair to say he did pretty damn well at it too. He served in the Wisconsin state legislature, where he led the movement to abolish capital punishment in his state, and he was eventually appointed by President Abraham Lincoln himself as collector of the port, as in the place ships dock to load cargo, not the delicious fortified wine. Scholes' new role, which was to collect import duties, didn't just earn him more commission than a toilet roll salesman during a pandemic, it freed up his time to do what he loved best, invent things. Scholes had spent much of his life dabbling in inventing, but in 1864, he finally secured a patent for a page numbering machine, something guaranteed to earn him kudos with other printers. Then, fellow inventor Carlos Ghosn took a look at this machine and made the inspired remark that if it could print numbers, why not letters? Scholes and Ghosn, along with other letter printing enthusiasts, immediately set to work in their small Milwaukee workshop to create a machine by which a man may print his thoughts twice as fast as he can write them. Not a bad endeavor, given that people back then were still messing around with inkwells and leaky fountain pens. After 4 long years tackling uncooperative spools, rollers, and levers, the industrial foursome's efforts finally paid off when they secured a patent for what came to be the world's first commercially successful typewriter. But it was a very different beast to the one loved by hipsters and eccentric aunties today. It looked more like a musical instrument than a writing device, with its elongated ivory and ebony keys laid out exactly like those on a piano. The letters on those keys were arranged in alphabetical order, and like Bob Marley, it was rather partial to jamming. Presumably, Scholes hoped his customers liked jamming too, and judging by the product's early successes, it seems they probably did. Because after shipping out their first piano-style typewriter to a Mr. Edward Porter of Porter's Telegraph College in Chicago, the orders started flooding in. But as a quick glance at the nearest keyboard will tell you, the modern-day descendants of Scholes' typewriter look nothing like pianos, and unless you're some kind of sociopath, the keys won't be in alphabetical order either. So what happened? Your keys may not be in order, but your balls will be when they are shaven and nicely scented with Manscaped.com. Who've kindly sponsored this video. Lately, I've been using Manscaped's brand new Refined Cologne, which has the most incredible scent. It's light and approachable, but with a pleasing masculine scent. Ideal for the refined gentleman that you are. Refined is calming and inviting on the nose, with a light citrus burst, before settling into the anchoring notes of vetiver, eventually landing on a woodsy, masculine finish. It's hypoallergenic, cruelty-free, dye-free, paraben-free, and 100% vegan. I love the look of the bottle. It makes a statement on your dresser or in your gym bag. And it's the perfect accompaniment to Manscaped's incredible all-in-one performance package kit, which includes the new Lawnmower 3.0. It's waterproof, so you can maintain your lawn in the shower, and with advanced skin-safe technology to help reduce any nasty nicks and cuts. The Performance Package Kit also includes the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant and the Crop Reviver Ball Toner. And 2 free gifts: the Shed Travel Bag, I love this thing, and the very fetching Manscaped Anti-Chafing High Performance Boxer Briefs. Go to manscaped.com today and get 20% off, plus free international shipping, plus 2 free gifts when you use the promo code 42 at manscaped.com. Your balls and body will thank you. Well, we know from an article published in Scientific American that by 1872, Scholes had swapped the keyboard's original layout to the decidedly counterintuitive arrangement we use today, the so-called QWERTY system. But the million-dollar question is, why? Did he feel the alphabet had seen its best days and was on its way out? Was the new layout inspired by a particularly heavy night on the opium? Was he just a bit of a knob? The most popular explanation is that Scholes had to redesign the keyboard in response to the mechanical failings of those early typewriters. If a user quickly hit keys with type bars next to each other, the delicate machinery would jam, and so Scholes needed a way to slow typists down. Makes sense, but this theory is not without its critics. If it were correct, after all, the QWERTY system should create the maximum separation of the most common letter pairings in English. You'll see from your own keyboard that H and E and A and N are separated, but T and H, the most common letter pairing of all, are fairly close to each other, whilst E and R, the 4th most common, are directly next to each other. And here, the plot thickens even further. Scholes' typewriter prototypes had yet another keyboard layout that was only changed immediately before he filed the QWERTY patent. And if that layout had been put into production, I'd be telling you about the QWERTY keyboard. In other words, one where E and R are not next to each other and where punctuation can be found mixed up amongst the letters. This could suggest Scholes wanted to slow typists down after all, but what caused his last-minute change of heart? The answer, oddly enough, lies with firearms manufacturer E. Remington & Sons. In one of the more peculiar cases of product diversification, Remington decided the typewriter, cutting-edge technology at the time, was the perfect complement to its bread-and-butter line of rifles and revolvers. The man behind this surprising move was Remington executive Henry Benedict, who'd received a typewritten letter from Scholes and had been so impressed he immediately offered his company's manufacturing expertise. Which was an especially surprising result, given Scholes' typewriter could only print capitals at that point, so his letter probably came across a little shouty. To Scholes' delight, Remington signed a contract to manufacture his machine straight away. But then their engineers produced a prototype with a different keyboard layout. They'd switched the R key with the full stop. Scholes was understandably angered by their impudent cheek and demanded the R key be put back in its rightful position. Remington agreed and released their #1 typewriter in 1874. It seems the slow typing theory might still be true, at least when it comes to Scholes' original intent. But for those of you unconvinced, here are 2 alternative theories. One is that the keyboard was adapted to suit its very first users. Remember Porter's Telegraph College? Their telegraph operators supposedly found the alphabetical arrangement to be inefficient for translating Morse code. And so, the theory goes, QWERTY was designed to meet their needs, with letters that had similar Morse code designations placed closer together. Another theory is that QWERTY derives from a flamboyant sales technique, as it would have allowed the Remington salespeople to quickly peck out typewriter using only the top row of letters to dazzle potential customers. A technique guaranteed to win over the stingiest of technophobes, I'm sure you'll agree. The theory sort of makes sense, and it does seem a little too coincidental that all of the required letters can be found on the top row, but unfortunately there's no hard evidence to back this one up. One thing we do know is that the QWERTY typewriter, which initially left buyers unimpressed due to its high cost and tendency to break, nonetheless secured its position in the marketplace, thanks to a stroke of marketing genius. Remington decided to offer free or discounted typewriters with their touch typing courses. That's basically just typing in 2021. But back then, people mostly used the hunt and peck method, still favoured by grandmas to this day. The course helped typists to memorise the position of the keys, which allowed for greatly improved typing speeds. But here lies the truly ingenious thing about this course. The touch typing skills it taught were only ever relevant to QWERTY keyboards, making it virtually impossible for participants to use a different layout later on. Remington literally programmed their layout into the brains of their typists, creating a kind of QWERTY zombie horde who infiltrated private business colleges, prestigious universities, and even the Young Women's Christian Association. According to Remington at the time, and why would they lie, moving to a non-QWERTY model could cause typists' words per minute to go down by as much as 80%, placing employers in a bit of a tight corner because even if they wanted to buy a different model, they'd have to take a huge hit to productivity to do so. And that's pretty much how the QWERTY typewriter won the battle for dominance in the 1880s. By 1890, there were more than 100,000 QWERTY keyboards in use in the US alone. A well-deserved pat on the back for Scholes and Remington then, but has QWERTY remained a good thing for society? The short answer is probably not. The designs that made life easier for telegraph transcribers and touch typists back then are more or less irrelevant now, and several other keyboard layouts have claimed to be far more efficient. One particularly fierce critic, an educational psychologist called Dvorak, believed so firmly in the shortcomings of the QWERTY design that he had a team of engineers test a whopping 250 keyboard variations and concluded that QWERTY was one of the worst arrangements possible. Harsh words, but he backed them up by pointing out many of its letter combinations required awkward finger motions. Some common combinations had to be typed with the same finger, and too much typing was done with the left hand, which everyone knows is a tool used only by devil-worshipping witches. Then again, Dvorak did have what you might call a conflict of interests. In 1936, he patented an alternative to QWERTY, the Dvorak Simplified Keyboard, which he claimed was easier to master, faster to use, and gentler on the hands. The most common letter pairings were typed with alternate hands using the strongest fingers, and the right hand did most of the work. With such great apparent gains, people started to take an interest in the Dvorak keyboard in the 50s, and a few businesses and government organizations even considered retraining their typists. But in the end, it didn't take off. Later experiments showed that a whole range of designs allowed similar typing speeds to Dvorak when typists were fully trained, suggesting that all of his careful design principles might have had little to no effect after all. And then there's the not-so-small issue of retraining people on a mass scale to use a different keyboard layout. It should only take about 52 hours, according to Dvorak himself, but as we've seen, he's probably not to be trusted. And anyway, he wants to book time off work for a typing holiday. If you do fancy having a go just for the hell of it though, you absolutely can. Linux, Windows, and Mac all offer the option to switch to a Dvorak keyboard layout. Or you could try the more modern version, Colmac, which claims to be far more ergonomical than QWERTY. Since becoming the de facto standard, the QWERTY keyboard has seen off dozens, if not hundreds of competitors in this way. It's transferred seamlessly from mechanical typewriters to computers to touchscreens, and it seems to be ubiquitous wherever the Latin alphabet is standard. It seems that, as a society, we're locked into QWERTY despite its shortcomings. We teach kids to use QWERTY because it's everywhere. And why is it everywhere? Because we teach kids to use it. But QWERTY isn't the only technology to stick around past its sell-by date. Far from it. We think of technology as being something progressive that adapts to our existing needs, as well as needs we don't know we even have yet. But sometimes things don't quite work out that way, and we find ourselves locked into using a suboptimal product. In fact, this phenomenon is so common, it has a name: path dependence. It's when a feature of the economy isn't based on current conditions, but rather a sequence of past actions or requirements. In a nutshell, it's a theory based on the assumption that history matters. One classic example of path dependence is the videotape format war, a period of intense competition in the late 70s and 80s between Betamax and VHS. Both technologies solved the same problem: how to store information efficiently on a cassette tape. And many expected Sony's Betamax to win. It offered better image and sound quality than JVC's VHS. But Sony focused their marketing on time shifting. Their ads featured headlines like, "Watch whatever, whenever," highlighting the fact that for the first time ever, TV footage didn't have to be watched when it went on air. JVC, on the other hand, cunningly focused their efforts on getting cozy with the new video rental industry. When that market grew, VHS dominated its titles. The stores gave more shelf space to the slightly more dominant brand, which then dominated even more. This created a bandwagon effect. Manufacturers switched to VHS because they expected it to win the battle, locking consumers in even further. Finally, Sony, in a surprising act of moral superiority, refused to let pornography companies license their technology for mass production, which meant that nearly all porn released on video used VHS format. And that, as you might expect, was the final nail in the coffin for Betamax. VHS won the video format war despite being an inferior product. And Betamax wasn't seen again until a guest appearance in The Mighty Boosh. Of course, both Betamax and VHS went on to be replaced by DVD, then Blu-ray, and finally digital streaming. And it isn't difficult to imagine that a similar fate awaits QWERTY. It seems that no other keyboard layout will be able to replace it, but will keyboards themselves become a thing of the past in the not too distant future? Tap, for instance, is a one-handed gadget that fits over your fingers, kind of like rubbery brass knuckles, and connects wirelessly to your smartphone. You then tap your fingers in certain combinations to create letters, and you could, theoretically, do this anywhere. On a table, your arm, somebody else's arm. It's supposed to free you from keyboards entirely by acting as a go-anywhere typing interface. Other tech, such as predictive typing software, is also starting to make the keyboard less essential. Google's Smart Compose, for instance, offers simple, and sometimes hilarious, AI-powered suggestions and responses. It's already saved people from typing over 1 billion characters each week, enough to fill the pages of 1,000 copies of Lord of the Rings. There's even a possibility we won't need any kind of input interface at all. Norable is a Massachusetts-based startup that's working on a way to type simply by thinking. Their method isn't exactly subtle, as it uses an electro-dotted headband to track your brain activity, but machine learning helps it figure out which letter you're trying to select and anticipate the one you'll want next. Imagine the fun that drunk you is going to have with that one. So, if QWERTY is ever replaced, it's looking like the winner will be a completely different type of input altogether, not just another keyboard layout. But there's another way QWERTY has affected society that's perhaps a little bit more disturbing than inefficient typing and carpal tunnel syndrome. In 2012, two psychology researchers, Kyle Jasmine and Danielle Casasanto, demonstrated something they called the QWERTY effect. They figured out that words using a higher proportion of letters from the right-hand side of the keyboard tend to be easier to type. That's because the QWERTY keyboard is asymmetrical, meaning there are more letters on the left of the midline than on the right. Weirdly enough, they discovered we associate these easier to reach words with more positive emotions, and that because of this, QWERTY may have influenced the emergence of new words, such as lol, and even our choice of baby names. From around 1990, which the team defined as the dawn of the modern keyboard era, invented names had a much higher proportion of right-side letters than popular names of the previous 3 decades. And existing names with more right-side keys, names like Noah, Sophia, and Liam, were also increasingly favoured. The researchers even went on to advise that people responsible for naming new products, brands, and companies might do well to consult their keyboards when choosing the right name. Pun intended. This turned out to be sound advice. 4 years later, another study carried out by David Garcia and Marcus Streymeyer found that people do indeed prefer products and video titles spelt with more right-hand side letters. The pair gathered huge amounts of data from websites like Amazon, IMDb, Yelp, YouTube, and even Pornhub, and found that content with more right-side letters was, on average, more highly rated by the audience in terms of reviews, likes, and ratings. In other words, QWERTY is actively shaping our choices as we filter language through our fingers. So next time you're kicking back to enjoy the latest 42 video, doing some late night shopping, or engaging in some self-love, send a virtual high five to Christopher Scholes. After all, he's probably playing a more active role in all our lives than many of us would have ever imagined. Thanks for watching. Thanks again to manscaped.com for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check it out using the link in the description below.